Good morning. Welcome to the Great Transition Senior Living Seminar Series. Today we're going to be tackling a tough topic. Senior living care and costs. Why is it so expensive? I'm Beth Lagulo, and I'm excited to be your host today as we take a journey with our good friends here. Money is a source of a lot of stress. I remember my late husband used to teach a course on money management, and he would say that he learned that there are more verses about money in the Bible than there are about prayer. So God thinks it's pretty important, so I guess it's a good thing that we would talk about it today. You know, if you have more than enough money, not enough, or just enough, there's concern or stress, no matter what your situation. If you have more than enough, there's stress about losing it. If you don't have enough, there's stress on how to get more. And if you have just enough, there's stress on how to best use it, right? So we face that at every turn. Planning can help alleviate some of the stress. Pam and I were having a conversation just before we got started today about some planning that she has done, and it has relieved some stress, I'm sure, in a situation that she's facing right now with her HOA. It's not about, well, we had some really wise financial advisors that visited with us last year, and they told us it's not about the zeros in your bank account, it's about the money you have and making a plan and to make the choices that you want. So we appreciate that from some really smart people that we know. So we could teach probably for the next 6 months on money and still not cover it all, but today we're going to hit a few of the high points. And again, we'll have a Q&A, so jot down your questions. At the end, we'll be asking for any questions because I'm sure there will be some. So before we get started, I'm going to ask our panelists to tell us a little bit more about themselves and how they came to sit at the table today. Dana, you want to get started?
Sure. Hi everybody, I'm Dana again. I joined Evershore like 5 years ago after a big change in careers, but actually not a big change of what I was doing every day. I was selling hotel conventions around the world and helping organizations make really smart decisions for themselves from a long-term planning type of space. Obviously, that's not what I do now. I don't get to sell fancy events all over the world, but I do get to help people and small businesses with their long-term plan to be really strategic and really smart. So actually, my day job has remained largely in place, although I did have to take a bunch of tests to become a fully licensed financial advisor. And that brings up just a really great point, whether you have a financial advisor right now or you're looking for a new one, making sure that you understand who's across the table from you and that their licenses allow them to do what you need them to do is very important. At the end of the day, it's your money, everything that you've worked hard for and everything that has brought you to the table today. But you have to like the person that you're going to do business with. If you don't think they're listening to you, if you don't think they're kind, if you don't think that they're going to be in business tomorrow, don't do business with them. Find a different financial advisor. They're supposed to be your partner in this aspect of your life. So I think that's just really important, whether you have one now or are looking for a new one.
Sean?
Yes, good morning everybody. My name is Sean Williams. This also was not really my original career out of college. I'm a Florida native, went to the University of Florida, and go Gators. And you're in Central Florida for my MBA. Wanted to work in the sports industry, worked for Gatorade, doing marketing around the country, and then I worked for Golf Channel here in Orlando, doing like data analytics. It was kind of boring, to be honest. Even though I like golf, it wasn't that exciting. It wasn't very challenging either. So I was just, talking to a friend of mine and telling him kind of what I was looking for and what I was interested in. And he was an advisor for Evershore. This was 8 years ago now. I was like, why don't you come in and talk to me and Dan, who's the managing director of our Orlando office, and just kind of was a good fit. I was mentored by a very senior advisor who's been doing this for a long time. Kind of learned through him to become the just wonderful financial advisor I am today. But I enjoy the challenge, and every day is different. Sometimes that's fun, sometimes it's a little frustrating. But I enjoy the education and the problem solving and getting to know people. And kind of to piggyback off of what Dana was saying, trust is also a very important thing when choosing who you're working with especially when it comes to your money, is if you trust that person, that they have your best interest in mind. So yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, I'm really glad to have you here because we trust you guys, right? And that's why all of the educational partners that you'll see in the room, we're all here because we're like-minded in that we have a heart for serving and educating people. And we offer this seminar series as a free way for you to come and learn with no pressure, no sales pressure, anything like that. It's just an opportunity for us to share with you what we know. And Evershore sounds much like our Keller Williams office in that very collaborative office. Everybody works together. It's not a scarcity mindset at all. A lot of information sharing goes on. So, well, let's jump in. I've got a ton of questions. Sean is very well prepared with 25 pages of notes, I think.
Always. You cannot say anything about Sean along the lines of not prepared. He's always so prepared.
You're
which
very
is wonderful.
You're an intimidating crowd to speak to.
I love you in the most appropriate way, right? Yes. Okay, awesome. Well, Dana, let's start with you. We've talked about planning. How do we determine, this is a big question that comes up, how do we determine how much is enough? What are the things that we need to consider and be looking at?
Yeah, I think that this question of how much is enough, it doesn't matter what phase of life you're in, right? We have that question before we buy our first home. How much is enough for the first down payment? We have that question before we go to have children. How much is enough? Children are so expensive. How much is enough to buy a business or buy a building that your business is in, right? We have this question so many times in life, and I'm gonna let you guys in on a little secret. Sean and I are really fun, lighthearted people, but I will be honest that today's conversation is gonna be a little frank, a little grim, maybe dark at a few points because this topic is just so important to everyone. And clearly it's very important in your lives. That's why you're here today. I think that for you all, one thing to remember when we're talking about specifically how much is enough for the long-term care plan, right? You guys have had these conversations either independently or with your spouse or with your friends when you were facing the decision of when to retire. It's really a very similar thought of how much is enough. Can I step away from my career, right? And at that point, you were thinking, or hopefully somebody was having you think, do you want to fly first class around the world in retirement? Or do you want to rock on your front porch with a lemonade, right? Those are both beautiful versions of retirement, but they're very different when it comes to financial planning. Well, the same thing is true for long-term care planning as we take the next step. Do we want the buffet? Do we want to be doted on hand and foot? We want the menu of options, right? And that might look like moving into a life plan community where you can go through the phases of life. Or do we want to order a la carte, right? We want to remain in home and we're going to have care brought to us. That's going to look a lot of different ways, right? But that's a similar conversation that you have to have with yourself. And it's no different than the conversation that you had before you retired, right? So I think sometimes we have so much pent up angst about, okay, what's this next step going to look like for me? And am I going to choose what it looks like? Or is the future going to be chosen for me, right? That could be based on health, that could be based on money, that could be based on your children, your adult children now and their feelings or their notions. That could be a lot of different things. We have to plan for the escalation of care, right? You all are in the room and you're thinking about long-term care planning, and largely it looks like you are beautiful and healthy right now, right? I'm sure everybody has their things. I have my things, right? But we have to really be thinking, again, grim, frank. Okay, what's this gonna look like when it hits the fan, right? Let's be real about it. And we're gonna talk about a few things about that today. I had a girlfriend, my mom passed away almost 8 years ago, and I was just returning to work, and I got a phone call that an old client of mine who I had become really friendly with, her mom had passed away. And I didn't even know what to do, but I picked up the phone and I called her. Thank goodness she didn't answer because I was already sweating, right? And she didn't answer, and I left her a voicemail, and I said, I don't think you know why I've been out, but my mom died. I'm hearing yours did too. Call me. We can talk about this, right? But there was a big difference. She was 39 weeks pregnant with her first baby, okay? I wasn't even married. I was super single at that time. And actually, that's not true. I'm sorry. I had just gotten married. And so I really, Susan and I really bonded in a very different way. Her mom had been sick, but her mom was still working and was the earner of her family. So when her mom passed away, her dad really had to step up in a different way than he was used to in their marriage. And they weren't totally prepared for that. They had money, some, right? It was not that he was going to need to sell his home tomorrow, but there was not a great amount of planning that had been done. A year and a half, 2 years goes by, and he's struggling. He's struggling with the loss of his wife. He's struggling with this increased responsibility, and he's struggling with the financial aspect of it. They made a decision that he would move into an assisted living facility, and this is up in the Baltimore area. And honestly, they just blew through the money really quickly. So now her and her two brothers are in their early 40s. They're all raising young children, and they are really having to financially care for their father. It could have been different. There was enough money there. There just wasn't a plan. And she had been sick for a while. So the planning that was happening was around her health, which is wonderful, and you wouldn't necessarily do it differently, but you probably should have done it differently, right? And so that's kind of the reality of what we want to talk about today. It, again, to Beth's point of just reminding you something that we said last year, we can't create more zeros in your bank account, and it largely doesn't matter. It does matter that there needs to be a plan, and a realistic plan.
Awesome, thanks. And I think when we hear stories like that helps us. What I heard was, I need to make the plan before I get sick or before there's an issue, because I can focus on that part of the plan much easier without having those other things. Thanks, Dana. Sean, what are the financial options available for future living arrangements? Healthcare, we're looking at this long-term plan. What do we need to focus on?
Yep, so there's pretty much with anything when it comes to money, there's no just singular general answer that applies to everybody, but it's about putting the puzzle pieces of your situation together. Gonna do a general overview because we get into more detail on a lot of this kind of throughout our discussion. But let's start with what doesn't pay, what really aren't options for healthcare and how it applies to future living arrangements. So Medicare, except for some short-term coverage, Medicare supplement plans, and disability insurance. Those aren't designed to cover healthcare, long-term healthcare in living arrangements. What does pay for it can really be boiled down to 4 options: your money, someone else's money, insurance money, and government money. So your money, right, obvious, we all know it's personal savings, income, investments, retirement savings, annuities if you have those, home equity, whether that be from selling your house, lines of credit, reverse mortgages. Someone else's money, it's typically gonna be your kids. Some things to think about, and if that's part of the plan, is do they have the money? Do they wanna spend it on you? Do you want them to spend it on you? And do they know that that's the plan? That's a big one. They should know. Long-term care insurance is insurance to help cover the cost of extended care services if someone can't perform daily living activities. It helps protect your assets, can ease some burden on family members, and extends your options of care. Long-term care insurance is not designed to cover the entire cost of your care. It's there to supplement and make sure you're not paying dollar for your care. And then the last option is government's money. So really, that would be Medicare, Medicaid. They should make them sound differently. Medicaid, which is a safety net which requires you to spend down your assets and your income can impact your eligibility. And veterans benefits, which there are, there's some assistance available to veterans, which we'll get into more detail, down the road also.
Okay, thanks. So I had a conversation with my parents recently. We were talking about some planning, and my mother said we retired at 62 because we never intended to live this long. We just celebrated my mom's, I hope she's not watching, 87th birthday and my dad's 89th birthday. They didn't think, based on their family history, that they were gonna live that long. And we're seeing this increase. We know that life expectancy over the past 150 years has doubled. Never before in history. There are 7 living generations right now. So we're living much longer. What financial strategies can individuals adopt to ensure that what they have saved covers the rising costs and the longer term that they're likely going to need the money? Dana?
Yeah, you all should have asked for some sort of game, like every time I say planning, everybody gets $1, because you would have walked out of here at least with lunch paid for. But I think, Beth, you're absolutely right. Many people don't want to think about planning until 90, right? And when you ask them why, we've heard it all. Right, of why they don't want to plan until 90, whether someone is very clear that they don't want to live to 90, or whether they think, well, men always are gonna die first, they say, right? All men in our office say, oh, I'm gonna go first. Or they say, oh, well, when it's time, I'm gonna go out back and, I'll take care of business, right? Or it doesn't matter. There are so many excuses, if you will, of why people don't wanna plan until 90, but the statistics are exactly right. We are living until longer than ever. And so the plan has to accommodate for that. And then if it doesn't happen, okay, we adjust the plan. 70% of adults over 65 will require care at some point. 70% of adults 65 and older will have a long-term care need at some point. Statistically, for women, the length of that long-term care need is 3.7 years. For men, statistically, it's 2.2 years. This is the type of minutia math that we need to be doing, right? So it's not even just the realization of, okay, I'm going to have a long-term care need. It's how much money is that long-term care need going to take, right? So for women, 3.7 years, for men, 2.2 years is the statistics. Whoop, that was hard. So when we talk about it, again, from a financial strategy, I always really like to answer questions directly. So the question was, what strategies, financial strategies can we use, right? Again, not rocket science. As financial advisors, we hate using the term buckets, but honestly, it's like the best language out there. It's easy to understand.
I like it.
Okay, good. I'm so glad. So from a bucket perspective, we still need same buckets we've been talking about your entire financial life. We need different buckets. We need your short-term bucket. We need your long-term bucket. We need your middle bucket, right? We got all the buckets. That could be from a tax perspective. That could be from investments. All the parts of your life are in these various buckets, but they have to reach for that long-term care that we're gonna have. So the bucket strategy is really important. And also making sure that we invest for the long-term growth that we're gonna need, right? So people saying, oh, well, I'm retired now, I want everything out of the market. Well, that probably won't be wise, right? Because retirement can last a really long time, and we need to make sure that the money is situated in those buckets to last the time of your life. Certainly annuities can help with that. They're not the only way to make that long-term care growth happen, but it's a strategy, if you will. And also, again, just using real numbers to account for the long-term care needs that you're gonna have. There's a website, we've talked about it before, genworth.com, Genworth, GENWORTH, genworth.com. There are several websites, but Genworth, in my opinion, is one of the easiest. You can put in your zip code of where you want to receive care. So if you know as part of your plan that you will be moving back home to Michigan, or you will be moving to Texas where one of your children is and you're gonna be closer, put in their zip code, right? Try to make it as real as possible. You can do in-home care. You can also put in that you are going to move into some type of community. You can have a private room, you can have a semi-private room, like all of the things are in there. And it will give you the median dollar amount, the median cost of care in that area. So then we can really look at that 3.7 years for women and that 2.2 years for men. It just really helps us break it down into more tangible numbers when we're looking at our money and kind of addressing that with the long-term care plan. And then of course another strategy, it's not as fun of one, but maybe the most basic that we don't want to overlook is a way to make your money last is to also reduce living expenses. And really looking at that as we kind of have this conversation.
Awesome.
I think it's the Genworth website, it's like costofcare.com, something along those lines, but you can just Google Genworth long-term care costs and it
Could
should
you
come up.
repeat that again?
This may not be exact, but I think it's like costofcare.com or care costs.
No, the website was what?
That's what I'm saying, it's like costofcare.com or something along those lines.
Rather, it's
Yeah.
Genworth built it,
Yeah.
it sounds like,
Yeah.
but they have named it costofcare.com
You can-
so that it's more
Yeah,
neutral.
it's not like a link to Genworth or anything, it's you can probably just Google Genworth long-term care costs,
Is that gonna be scary?
yes.
Okay,
No.
alright, well,
I mean, I don't know, it depends what your expectations are, I guess.
and
It
I
might
think,
just be a wake-up call.
Yeah.
It might
Yeah.
just be a reality check, especially if any of you cared for your parents or your aunts or uncles. If you've already cared for a loved one and you have that as your benchmark of what it cost or what their experience is, it's 2025 now. It's different. And so it could just be a little bit of a gut check.
yeah, okay, well, and we need those.
Sure.
That's part of making a good plan. Let's have a little pop quiz. See how y'all been listening.
Uh-oh.
So we got a myth or truth. Most people are completely prepared. They have planned where they will live and how they will fund their long-term care as they age. Myth or truth? Truth is, most people spend more time discussing their dinner plans than how they will fund adequate living arrangements as they get older. As Scarlett O'Hara said, tomorrow is another day. Right? All right. Let's do another one. These are fun. Healthy people won't need long-term care. Truth or myth? Truth is, according to Genworth, 7 out of 10 people will require some form of long-term care in their lifetime. And I think those numbers that you just gave us, Dana, about women 3.7 years, men 2.2 years, potentially of needing that higher level of care could be pretty costly. Yeah. Okay, good job. You all get 100. Let's move on. So, Sean, we talked about some different buckets that are top of mind in that, I've got a savings account, I've got this account, a retirement account, I've got a pension, whatever, all of those different buckets. What about the equity in our home? We have a lot of people in the room that may own their home outright. What do we do with that?
Yeah, and your home's, and that's a big piece of the pie usually. And there are a few different ways you can use the equity in your house. The first, and probably the most profound, which is why we get paid the big bucks, is you can sell your house and people will give you cash for it. I know, you wanna write that down.
Cash for home?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And does that matter if they get a mortgage? It's still cash to you, right, at the end of the day?
Yeah, right, or the lender's paying you, someone's paying you.
Right.
But we all know that, right? You can sell your home, whatever your equity is gets paid to you. It's more of, okay, then what do you do with that afterwards, right?
Yeah.
It's maybe you're downsizing to another home, a smaller home, or just somewhere else, or you're moving to a different state, but you can use the proceeds of the house to put money into the new house. Or if you're going into a continuing care community, and there's a buy-in, you can use the proceeds of your house for the buy-in portion, and then if there's a difference, right, maybe you sold your house more for whatever your new house is or your new living situation is, using that difference to pay for monthly costs. So for example, let's say you sold your house, you get $500,000, buy-in for I'm just pulling numbers out here, for a continuing care community is $250,000, means you still have $250 left. That's what you need to be using to pay for the monthly cost moving forward. And you're gonna wanna invest some of that so you can have some growth, extend the time the money lasts, but also to account for increases in costs in the future. And in that scenario too, because there's so many different options about what your next step may be, before you even go to sell your house, you should have a plan and look through all the different options of what's gonna be, one, the best way to utilize the money, but also what do you want and what's gonna be best for you moving forward. Another option is a home equity line of credit, where you can take a line of credit against the equity you have in your house. Typically, there's an 85% loan to value ratio, so some more fun numbers. Let's say your house is worth $400,000, 85% of that is $340,000. But you have $200,000 left on your mortgage. $340 minus the $200 means you can, most likely the max line of credit you'll be able to get is $140. So the $200 plus the $140 to get to the 85%. The line of credit will have what's called a draw period. Usually it lasts about 10 years. That's the time you can access line of credit for cash. And during that time period, you can elect to make interest-only payments back if you want. Usually it's gonna be variable interest rates also. You have to start paying back the principal when that draw period ends. So you also need to be doing some planning on, okay, when the draw period ends, make sure you have the money to pay back the loan when that time comes. And this is something you would do if you don't wanna sell your house, or you don't wanna move, or you don't wanna do a reverse mortgage, but you wanna tap into the equity in your house.
So you would use that money to maybe make your house.
Home modifications,
Yeah.
people, during COVID, they were happening a lot more just because interest rates were so low, but, people putting in pools, but, home modifications, whatever.
Redoing a bathroom so it might be wheelchair
Exactly,
accessible?
yeah, whatever needs to be done.
Okay.
The last option would be a reverse mortgage, which allows homeowners to convert equity into cash payments, which can either be lump sum or monthly. You don't have to pay back that loan while you're living in the house. The interest just builds on top. It has to be paid back when the homeowner either passes away, sells the property, or permanently moves out. And keep in mind too, you continue to pay property taxes, home maintenance, all the joys of homeownership still apply. You can usually get 40 to 60% of the home's value, and 62 is the youngest age you can get a reverse mortgage. I believe the older you are from there, you can usually get some better terms. We're not reverse mortgage experts by any means. I know Rhett, who's not here today, he's a great mortgage broker. He definitely can provide a little more depth of knowledge on that. But those are really the three ways you can utilize the equity in your home.
I think we're probably gonna do some workshops through the course of the year, and one of those might be a reverse mortgage workshop. I work in real estate and have a lot of questions about it, so it's something that's hard to understand, but, okay, so that's a great overview of how we can use that, usually a pretty significant chunk of
Sure.
money that's sitting in our home. Dana, you mentioned, one of you mentioned, long-term care insurance and how that can be used. What happens if I'm over 65 and I don't have long-term care insurance?
Sure. I think it's important that today's session is around long-term care planning, right? And Sean needed like a light bulb moment off of something he said earlier because it was brilliant and it's really important. There are 4 ways. I'm going to repeat it because it's something very important to remember. There are 4 ways, and only 4 ways, to pay for a long-term care need. Your money, somebody else's money, long-term care insurance, or some other government benefit, whether it's Medicaid or VA benefits or something like that, right? So we get so wrapped up in the complexity of this topic, but really it's quite simple. There are just 4 ways. So long-term care insurance is just one way to be a part of your long-term care plan, right? It's not the only way, it's not the whole way, it's just one part of your plan. It is absolutely true that the younger you are, there are more options from a long-term care insurance aspect. You'll also remember in the beginning I talked to you about being a fully licensed financial advisor and how that's very important. If you're speaking with an insurance agent about long-term care insurance, they can only talk to you about the insurance types of long-term care insurance, right? There's also annuity types of long-term care insurance, but you would need to speak with someone that's fully licensed and can do trades, right? So it's not that one is better, it's that when you're talking about long-term care insurance, there are many variables. Your age is certainly one of them. Your overall health is another. Can you get through underwriting today? Or do you have some health concerns and we're not going to be able to get you through underwriting? It's okay if you can't get through underwriting. It just kind of puts you in a different bucket, right? Do you have money on a monthly basis that you want to make premiums? Or do you have some type of IRA or bucket of money that you would like to use a lump sum to fund this long-term care insurance? Is it important to you that the long-term care insurance has a death benefit? Therefore, it will not be a use it or lose it, right? If you don't end up having a long-term care need, a death benefit could be paid to your beneficiary. These are all the different types, and I know your head's like swarming, right? Like I just talked about so many different needs, but that's why you have to work with a professional that can understand what your situation is and what your goals are. Long-term care insurance, as we mentioned in the beginning, it's not intended to cover every dollar of healthcare. We can't possibly account for that, right? Like, first of all, the costs are outrageous. And second of all, it's just not a great use of money. But the long-term care insurance is there to protect your assets. We drain that first before going to the rest of your buckets, right? So if you're over 65, there are still wonderful options out there. They really are. You could have standalone long-term care insurance. You could have a hybrid long-term care and life insurance policy. You could have an annuity with a long-term care rider. But it just takes having a conversation with a trusted professional to really help you kind of figure that out. Also, there's lots of ways to make sure that there's not an increased premium. Right? If you had addressed long-term care insurance 20 years ago or so, everyone was griping for these big hefty premium increases, right? And if you have a policy from back then, that could be a struggle that you're dealing with. The long-term care insurance world has really evolved. So some of those bigger concerns have just been addressed. My parents, my parents are in their 70s, I told you that my mom passed away. When my parents were caring for their mothers, both of their fathers passed away really quite young, like in their 60s. But both of my parents, both of my grandmothers, lasted until like 90s, which was wonderful. And my dad's mom had long-term care insurance. So my dad and his brother did not have to come out of pocket much, if at all, for her long-term care needs. My mother's mom, my grandmother on that side, had no long-term care insurance, and my mom and her two siblings had to come out of pocket extensively to pay for her long-term care. What did that result in? That resulted in my parents and all of their siblings getting long-term care insurance,
Yeah.
right? No matter what side of the coin their experience was, it ended in getting long-term care insurance, right? In my mother's case, she wasn't able to use her long-term care insurance, and it was an older policy, so that was a use it or lose it. My dad got like a little bit of an increased benefit, but of course he's griping about it, right? I mean, it's natural. But you know, it's there, and it would have been there if my mom needed it, which would have been wonderful for my father.
Awesome, thanks. So how many buckets do we have to pay for long-term care? 4, right, okay, easy peasy. All right. We have this conversation a lot in our business, you guys do too. Let's look at the cost between aging in place, staying in the home, versus going to a senior community, whether it's a rental community or continuing care community. On the surface, staying in what you got tends to make a lot of sense to most people. But there are some things that we may overlook when we're doing this analysis. Sean, can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, I think the thing that gets overlooked first is probably the most obvious. You know, when we're talking to people about moving into a continuing care retirement community, you say, oh, I have to pay this lump sum to get in, and the monthly costs are more than my mortgage payment, or I don't even have a mortgage payment anymore. But they don't always think about the cost of just owning a home, right? So we've got property taxes, homeowners insurance, cost of just general upkeep of the house, lawn, cleaning. You know, it's July 10th, 194 degrees outside, and your air conditioning breaks. New fence, new furniture, new roof, HOA fees, right? It's just on and on and on, the joys of homeownership. So people just kind of like look at monthly payment and mortgage. There's a lot more that goes into your monthly cost of owning a home than your mortgage or not having a mortgage, whatever, or annual cost really. So gotta look at that. People tend to overlook those things. This is not directly related to you know, staying at home, but just kind of the mindset people have on when they view their expenses. I'm the advisor for a 401k plan for a company in town, and it was benefits day last week. So I was in a meeting with people, and a guy comes in, he just had not saved at all, and he's, you know, not the youngest guy in the world. So he just asked me, how much do I need to save? Which, you know, that's the most common question we get asked, is how much? So we gotta learn a little bit more about him. So talking to him, and he's like, this is how much I make, these are my monthly expenses, $2,500. It's, you know, pretty frugal. So I'm saying, you know, just look at, based on monthly cash flow, you've got plenty of money, you can do this amount. And I started kind of, talked a little bit more, I started digging into, how are you only spending $2,500? And he goes, that's when I sit down every month, I write checks, those are the bills I pay. I'm like, okay, so you're not including groceries, you're not including fuel, entertainment, when you go out to eat, Friday night, whatever you're doing. It's like, no, I don't consider those bills. Well, I hate to be the one to break it to you, but those are in fact bills.
These are real conversations we have with people every day.
And I'm not, you know, it's just the way, that's just the way our minds work. We're pretty singularly focused, and again, we see with expenses more than anything. People underestimate what they're spending. Almost everybody does. Yeah, you've got all that stuff. And on top of that, as you age, kind of like what Dana mentioned, there's gonna be a gradual, I don't want to say growth, but growth into an escalation of care, right? And you potential home modifications, you may start where you have someone coming into the home a couple days a week to help with daily living activities, meal preparation, cleaning, you know, all that stuff. And then eventually they'll need to come in 5 days a week, then 7 days a week, and then you may get to a point where you need 24/7 really skilled care. And I've got some more numbers to throw at you guys that I know you guys love so much. The median cost of care in Florida for a home health aide, who is someone who helps with daily living activities, this is just in the state, 20 hours a week is $2,750 a month, or 32,500 a year.
And that's for,
20 hours a week for home health aides. That's just daily living activities, not even specialized care.
okay,
40 hours a week would be 5,500 a month, or 66,000 a year. 24/7 care would be 23,000 a month, or 278,000 a year. But the reality is, if you need someone in 24/7, it's more than likely going to be a registered nurse, and in that scenario, the cost essentially doubles. And those are today's costs; those will increase.
so if you needed 24/7 and you had hospice, that's one aspect of the
Sure,
care,
that's
but.
Different than
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's a big piece of payroll.
and listen, it's what you want, right? If that's something you can afford, and listen, I'm with you. The idea of just staying at home sounds great. Way easier for sure. But cost-wise, it depends on your situation. But like Dana referenced before, that Genworth Cost of Care website, it's a great tool. You can type in your zip code, it'll tell you different costs of in-home care, assisted living, nursing home, and then it'll project the cost looking forward in the future. We also have Melanie with Flourish in Place. She's a good resource if you want to look into in-home care as well. And then the other thing, this isn't necessarily financial related for you, but family caregiver is it always comes up, right? And roughly 2/3 of long-term care is either managed or provided by a family member. That's a big ask of somebody, right? But they're your family. Usually, family members are happy to help. But we have to kind of ask some questions about that. First off, does the family member have the skills that may be necessary as your care needs escalation? So when we meet with spouses, Betsy Sue will say, "Oh, I'll take care of Joe," when, because again, it's always the husband that is either dying or getting sick or something. Betsy Sue will say, "Oh, I'll take care of Joe," but Betsy Sue's 4'7" and weighs 85 pounds. Joe's 6'9" and weighs 250. So if he needs help moving around, she's not really going to be able to help. So you got to be practical about it also. And if it's not your spouse, it's your kids. And then do they have to take time off of work? They need to take a leave from work. How does it impact them financially? They experience health issues and stress from that as well. Another story. This actually happened on Friday last week. So I had just a Zoom review meeting with a client. Her mom has some health issues, is living with her, and then she's also helping raise her nieces and nephews. One of her nephews is a teenager, lives with her. So Zoom call popped on, just said, "Hey, how's your mom and nephew? How are they doing?" She started crying, immediately. And this is 30 seconds into the meeting. Typically not how you like to see meetings go. But she just needed that. The stress had just been building up inside of her, and she's kind of had that emotional outlet. On top of that, she also got in a car accident, tore her ACL and her MCL with all this going on. So
Wow.
it's just, and even though they're caring for you, their life still continues to go on, right? So, it can build up. So it's just an example of even if family members helping you out, they may need some time off. They may need their own help, right? With just helping care. And what's the plan for that? Where does that money come from? And I don't tell that story to make you feel like if your plan is to have your kids help out, is not to make you feel like you're burdening them, but there needs to be plans within the plans.
You gotta talk about it.
Yeah.
And what it's gonna look like.
Yeah, exactly, because they can't be there 24/7. There's gotta be alternative things happening. So the point of all that is if that is your plan, going through the planning of all these different scenarios, they need to be involved as well. It can't just be, "Oop, I'm sick, come take care of me," right? That does happen very often, but you need to have these discussions beforehand. Sorry, that's a little bit of a side tangent. Even I'm annoyed how much we've said it, you just gotta plan.
To help you with planning, one of the sheets that we put on your chair is a worksheet. To maybe jog your memory for some of those bills that you don't think are bills, right? That you're spending. I try to do an annual subscription review. Because you sign up for things and then it's like, did I really use that at all? Do I need it? So hopefully you'll find that tool helpful for you. Okay, Dana. What should, so let's speak to maybe the couples in the room for a moment. What should the we's do, knowing that probably one person is going to go before the other?
Yeah, this is again where it's like the conversation is not so fun to have, because if you are in a relationship, doesn't matter if your marriage has been for a year or 50 years or somewhere in between, you are making financial and life choices together. But when it comes to long-term care planning and life planning in this phase, we need to do it together, but we also really need to do the planning separately. I have a couple that I have been working with, and he is 15 years older than she. So I believe for majority of their marriage, it has been this conversation of, well, when you're gone, to the man, right? And making sure that the woman in this relationship has the financial security that she needs. Well, she just got a dementia diagnosis at the age of 59. So their whole planning is now literally like upside down, right? And we're kind of having to, start from scratch. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't need to be planning for her. It just also means that we need to be planning independently for him, right? And those conversations for them in their marriage are quite different than they have been for a majority of their marriage. So like we've mentioned, it is, if I had every dollar for every time I was in a meeting with a man that says, well, I'm gonna die first, I promise, I'm gonna die first, right? That's like literally what every man says in our office, and it just doesn't always happen like that. And so, again, this need for independent planning is just so important. And it's not just surrounding the money. The money is very important, but also the logistics. Where are your documents, right? We just followed up after Linda Solesh Reed, our estate planning attorney, and where are these documents? Where are the passwords? Have you subscribed to 1Password? It's a beautiful system. You pay for it, you create 1Password, it has all of your passwords. When my mom died, my parents were beautifully married, wonderful partnership. They knew everything about each other. My dad didn't have the password to the Excel document where the passwords were listed. I literally had to, I randomly worked with an organization that trained government hackers, like good hackers, like hackers for good. And I had to phone a friend and call in a favor to get my mom's double encrypted Excel spreadsheet hacked. Now, my father could have done that all, right? He has the death certificate, he has the marriage certificate. It would have taken him so long to undo that web, right? So now we are so much more organized as a family, and my husband and I, even though maybe some people would say we're young, I know his passwords, he knows my passwords, we know where stuff is, because freak accidents happen all day long, right? So yes, the long-term care planning as a we needs to be the conversation about money, but there's also some just easy logistics, Do we know who the company is for the mortgage? Does everybody know, even the utility company? We joke as a family that if my father would have passed away first, the learning curve, my dad's doing great. The learning curve with my mom would have been so steep. It's not even funny. My dad owns bars, so he always had cash. We joke that my mom never stepped in foot to a bank, So the learning curve would have been, we just had to teach my dad how to do laundry, but he's doing great. He's doing great. So all of those types of logistics are also very important if you are in a relationship. All of the elections that you make when it comes to Social Security income. If you have annuities, are you taking joint income or is it single income? These need to be conversations not only between yourselves, but also your financial advisor, and maybe even it's time to include your children or your nieces or nephew or any loved ones that are gonna help you when that time comes, right? It's time to open the door with some of the secrecies of your financial life. And that is obviously, just so important. I have a client that now it's a very different situation than when we first started working with this client. I've kind of come in, just in the past few years. But when we first met this client, he was in his 50s. There was a couple $1 million in the bank, nothing outrageous, but okay, we're setting ourselves up for a nice retirement. He was married. His wife got breast cancer, and sadly, it was in the time that too many women were dying from breast cancer. Thank goodness, things have advanced so much. And now, that was when the long-term care insurance had, even the health insurance had the $1 million cap, right? So he had to dip into all of their money to pay for her care. I don't think he would have done anything differently, but today, there are no more millions in the bank account. She sadly died. And now our involvement with him is just trying to hold on to the pennies so that he can age gracefully, right? And I think that's where it's really tough. As financial advisors, we always try to tell stories not to scare people, but to help connect in different ways. And if that client was here, he would say he would do the exact same thing, right? He would have spent every penny for his wife. But again, it could have been different, right? And that's where we want to open our eyes to the fact that things do happen. Bad things happen to great people every day. But if there is a plan in place, it will make those tough times just so much easier. And so I think whether you are an I or a we, you're in a relationship or not, those just real thoughts of how it really will go down is so important to have.
Yeah, 100%. My husband died suddenly at 47, and about a month before he died, we had a conversation about our life insurance policies, which were up for renewal. And I knew exactly what I had to do in the midst of that grief and dealing with that, but I knew what to do because we had the conversation. And when we had the conversation, I thought, this is silly. We're in our 40s, nothing's gonna happen. And who knew that I would need that? So yeah, the plan is so important, especially when you're in a season of grief. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the buckets we talked about was government money, right? So let's touch on that a little bit. I know we did some looking for my dad. My dad served in the United States Marine Corps, hoorah. But he did not serve during wartime. So there were no real options there. Let's talk first about Medicaid. And what it allows for senior living and healthcare costs, and any long-term care insurance options. Sean, you want to unfold that for us?
Yeah, let's talk about something fun like Medicaid. I might need a good cry and a cigarette after this. No, but with everything with the government, Medicaid can be a little confusing. But there is Florida-specific long-term care Medicaid programs. Medicaid as a whole exists to provide health and other services for those who are economically disadvantaged. In the state of Florida, there are income and asset limits that allow you to qualify for Medicaid. It depends on the type of care. So we'll start with nursing home. If there's one person applying, you have to make less than $2,900 a month before taxes a month, and that includes Social Security.
Gross.
Gross, yeah. And your asset limit is $2,000.
Wait, total assets?
Total assets. If you have $2,001, you do not qualify.
So you can't have a house?
I'm not there yet, just
Okay,
jumping ahead of me.
okay.
I like to leave the good news towards the end.
Okay,
If it's a married couple and one person applying, the spouse's income does not count towards that income limit. If it's a couple and both are applying, the income limit doubles to $5,800 a month and the asset limit is $3,000. So that's help with daily living activities, not necessarily, that's for nursing home. If it's help with daily living activities, the income qualifications actually drop. So if it's one person, it's $1,100 a month in income with $5,000 in assets. If it's a couple applying, it's $1,500 a month with $6,000 in assets. And if you qualify for assisted living or nursing care with Medicaid, you have to give all of your income to care payment, except for $160 a month, which is a personal allowance need.
$160.
Yep, so if you're making $2,000 a month in Social Security, $1,840 goes towards your cost of care, Medicaid supplements the rest. The good news, here we are, the good part, in the state, I don't know how good of news it is, but in the state of Florida, IRAs that are in payout status, so if you're of an age where you're having to take required distributions from your retirement accounts, that does not count towards your assets. Primary residence is also exempt, especially if it's one person applying. They're not gonna force the spouse into poverty, right, for the other person to qualify. There's also a look-back period in Florida that says you can't gift or transfer assets or sell assets under fair market value for the 60 months prior to applying. So that's the 5 years before you apply. You can't just start moving assets around to try to qualify later. That's called voluntary poverty. So if you do qualify, what benefits does it provide? Typically, it's about $1,500 a month for assisted living, and that's for medical care, not room and board. If you have in-home care, I think it depends a little bit on the situation, but it will cover 15 to 40 hours a week. And then it will cover the majority of a semi-private room in a nursing care or skilled care above what your income pays. So you can see it's not the easiest thing, right? It's a safety net. It's not really there for everybody to use. And it shouldn't really be the plan or the goal, but it is there if you run out of assets. It's a system for people who are in need, but we hear all the time, oh, I'll just use Medicaid. And these are people, sometimes people have quite a few assets. They're like, oh, I'll just qualify for Medicaid. Well, you probably won't, and that's based on what you have, it's not a very good plan. So having your plan be the sole purpose is I want to qualify for Medicaid is really not a good plan, but it's there if you get to the point where you do need it.
And if you needed nursing home, senior housing, do I get to pick where I go, or they're gonna tell me?
That I'm not entirely sure. I think if
our
you're
communities could probably tell us.
What was the question?
If I'm on Medicaid, can I decide to go to Allegro?
No.
Okay.
The options are like set.
I think, didn't they change that rule recently where it's not as easy to decide where you go?
Yeah, the options are gonna be much more limited. You have to go to a community that has the contracts in place
Right.
with the certain Medicaid, contracts, and then, even the places that do accept Medicaid are often limited on how much or how many people they have on Medicaid.
Right, like they have an allotment.
Yeah, like they have 10 apartments that can be on Medicaid and everyone else has to be private pay.
Yeah, and your eligibility gets reviewed annually.
And it would be different state to state. Medicaid is state funded.
Sure.
So if you plan to go to Michigan.
It's a way
understand
different.
why Michigan, has
Yeah.
a place for that.
It's very important, another just like frank, kind of moment. Sean and I really do hear, I just got a phone call last week, it was a referral from another elder law attorney, they just said, please, can you speak with this person? Her husband passed away, she's gonna be 67 in April. She was largely a homemaker for her career. Her husband was already taking Social Security. His Social Security payment was $3,800 a month. She wanted to buy a home in all cash to protect it for her daughter so that she could qualify for Medicaid. That's not going to work, right? Just her Social Security payment alone is going to disqualify her. So like Sean said, Medicaid is a system that is there for those that need. It should not be the plan. And for majority of people, the assets that you have, the Social Security, the income that you have is gonna largely disqualify you for that plan. So it's one of those misnomers that we just hear all the time, all the time. I'm gonna spend all my assets, it's like your income is gonna disqualify you. So it really is very important to think about and talk out loud about at the dinner table with your friends when you're with them. It's not a good plan, it's not a good plan.
All right, there's one more topic I want to cover. Do we have any veterans in the room? Okay, we have a few. Let's talk about VA benefits briefly, Dana.
Yeah, so I think just like we've been making a very important decision to differentiate long-term care insurance from long-term care needs or long-term care planning, the same is largely true with veteran benefits. There are benefits for veterans, and then there are benefits that are fulfilled through the VA, through the Veteran Administration. And those are two kind of separate entities that you have to think about. Beth is right in terms of when it comes to long-term care benefits, you have to have been on active duty for at least 90 days. One of those days needs to be in a war period. And so that is a huge kind of disqualifier, if you will, for a lot of people. If that affects you, then there are, different things. VA, another big portion of VA benefits that I think gets confusing for people is that VA hospitals have skilled nursing facilities, right? Skilled nursing facilities are largely for an acute problem. I fell down, I broke my hip, I need rehab while I'm recovering. It's not a long-term care hospital, right? Or it's not a long-term care facility. So the skilled nursing facilities that VA hospitals offer are just those for that, acute recovery. It's not for long-term care. So I think that's also really important. There are benefits, they don't necessarily cover the entire, they won't cover room and board and the medical attention that you have. But when you are already at an assisted living facility, there very well could be veteran benefits to apply more care to what you're already paying for. Sean and I, this is not our area of expertise. There are absolutely financial advisors out there that are incredibly well-versed when it comes to veterans. We know enough to be dangerous, but it's just not our area of focus. But those, I think, are the big things just to even separate in your brain if that affects you at all or just any of your friends or family.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know about y'all, but I took a lot of notes. My brain is full with a lot of stuff, and I'm sure we have some questions. I know we've got some mics out here with the educational partners. Whoever has a mic, if you could come and maybe stand over here so you can see a hand that gets raised. I know we've got a question in the back there, Larry. You
Yeah.
wanna?
I don't know if I need this or not. Could you, say again the qualifications for VA benefits?
Qual-
One day during an actual war period?
Yes.
So
So
repeat.
if you're in, you're not in the war theater, but you are serving active duty during that period.
That's
then you
correct.
qualify.
Yes, it's 90 days of at least 90 days of active duty with 1 day during a wartime.
Okay.
Okay. Did we have another question? Kurt?
Yeah, on the HELOC loan, are there any restrictions to how you use that money? Like, does it have to be used for home improvement or?
No, I don't believe so. I think it's, I think you can mostly use it for whatever you need. Because you're just taking a line on your equity, there's no parameters, yeah.
So the bank doesn't care as long as you pay it back?
Yeah, that's the big thing,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, very good. Do we have any other questions? Got one in the back of the room, Linda?
Sean, what did you say the weekly amount is for a home health care for 20 hours a week?
Oh, part-time home health care, 20 hours a week.
Yeah, let's see.
Is that 2,500?
Yeah, it was around 2,500. That's just the median cost for Florida. It's $27.50 a month for 20 hours a week. So
And that's in all of Florida. I have to imagine that care in Pensacola is different than care in Miami Beach.
Yes.
But median is
Good
27.50.
point.
Right
Yeah,
now,
I mean,
it's about running about $30 an hour. right
30 an
now.
hour.
30 an
Yeah,
hour?
$30 to $32 an hour in this area, the Central Florida area.
Yeah, I think that $27.50 month's like 32 an hour.
Okay.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Oh, we have a question from an educational partner.
Love it.
Thank you. So, and this is for you guys, maybe you can help me answer it. When you come across a client that is over the income or assets for that Medicaid application, do you guys refer out to an elder care attorney to do that and secure their income and assets, or do you apply yourselves?
Yes. Yeah, I do work with families who need Medicaid, and we can deal with someone being over income in certain things, depending on the situation.
Awesome. Isn't it great to have these resources all in the room to answer these questions? I love that. Some of you may have a question that you don't want to ask in the whole group. I think Dana and Sean are going to stick around for a few minutes and turn their mics off so you could come ask them a question. But did you learn anything today? Was this not awesome? We thank you both for being here today and giving us a lot of information. Did we try and sell you anything today? No. So, we always ask, what are you gonna do with this information that you learned today? So we do hope and we challenge you to fine tune that plan. Most of you are here because you have a plan, but now you might need to tweak it a little bit or expand upon it or talk to somebody about it. So we want you to do that. We also want you to tell your friends about our seminar series because we would love to be able to fill this room. Now that we have the space out front, we got room for more guests. We have more gift cards to give away if you bring a first-time visitor to us. And so we would love to see you at our next seminar in March. We're going to have fun with this one. We're going to be talking with all 5 of our senior living communities. And we're going to do it kind of like speed dating. So it should be a lot of fun. We would also love it if you would join us on our spring community tour hop as we go around and look at these 5 communities. I think you'll find it helpful. Many of you have been on the tours before and gotten a lot of great questions answered. And we always want to end our seminars with a quote, and this is a good one. Nicole finds some good ones. Thank you very much. Larry Elder says, a goal without a plan is just a wish. That's a little convicting. So thank you all for being here. We look forward to seeing you next month.